when you were 5 years old, your grandma taught you how to sew, and you would make all your own clothes. And when you graduated high school, you worked at a Civil War museum in the South, and they had all these costumes on display, and you'd clean them and you'd maintain them. And you started a blog where you would actually document a lot of the ways that you were taking care of these clothes, and it was all about crafts and sewing. And this was in 2008, and that blog led to millions of dollars in sales eventually, one way or another down the line across all your businesses. So I want to know how important it was looking back in those early stages for you to be creating content around things that you were organically interested in rather than starting with money as the primary goal.
Oh, you're good. This is like a deep dive of information here. It's like this information is like not even on the internet. Okay, to answer this question, I think it was at 5, obviously. I don't know that most 5-year-olds are thinking about money. Things just kind of appear out of nowhere. And as I got older, I realized that preserving history was super important for helping us understand how people think, how people live, why people do the things that they do, which ultimately ended up segueing into marketing. Because if you can understand people, you can sell them anything. So it started off as me just being interested in understanding more about people and why they do the things that they do. And fashion and style is very much determined by what's available at the time period, what the cultural expectations are of men and women, what the feminine masculine dynamic and roles are that are expected in each individual society at the time. And I think that just gave me a really interesting deep dive into humans, which was the driving factor behind me being so fascinated with fashion and style. So it didn't start with money because it wasn't I was so young when I started on this creative journey that I was very lucky that I didn't have to think about money when I was, like, 5 years old.
So the blog, it eventually pivoted, right, off of sewing and crafts and things, and it went more into travel. And I think a lot of that came from, your mom was a military brat and she was always moving around, and your father worked for NASA, and you guys were always just on the move. And I heard you say that you said, I'm always not happy unless I'm moving around. It was actually your mom's idea to start creating more travel content for your blog. So what did that pivot look like for you, going from one type of content to another? Was that like a big shift? Was there something in between those? Like, how did that go down?
So what was kind of in between it was I moved to Europe for work in 2011, like early 2011, and something I immediately noticed was how embarrassing Americans were in Europe. Like there's this everyone you can look it's even still a thing now, although I think it's shifted more towards making fun of how badly Americans understand like geography. but but while I was there, I realized that you could always tell the Americans by like how they were dressed, and it was just embarrassing. I was like, I don't want to be lumped in with these people. So it kind of segued into me just wanting to again understand a culture through the style and the fashion. So the content really started more as me documenting what I was wearing to not stick out like a sore thumb in Europe. And then I was just traveling, taking photos in these really gorgeous locations. And I started thinking, what if I could get some of this paid for? And I started pitching to hotels and travel agencies and airlines and just all kinds of brands to see if I could essentially exchange really organic, high quality content, photos, articles, just copy in exchange for them letting me have these experiences. And this was before influencer was a thing. So it more so was born of a practical solution that I was trying to find than, again, trying to make money off of it. And I really didn't realize I could make money off of content until 2015 after I'd been doing this for several years. And I started having brands and companies approaching me instead of me approaching them. And this is back in the day when, if anybody's ever been on a popular platform at the start of it, then you know how easy it is to typically grow on a new platform. And Google was no exception. You could publish anything and you would you would just stuff a bunch of words in the bottom of the page, make the words the same color as the background, and then Google would read them, and it would serve that content up to millions and millions of people. So that's how I grew my blog online, was like black hat SEO tactics, I guess they would be considered now. They don't work now at all. But it was just something I discovered in my pursuit of trying to get more views so that I could then go to like bigger and better brands to ask for collaborations. Again, it really didn't start to even become about money or like, oh, I could make money doing this until like between, I would say like 2015, because it also happened that I was getting more visibility and I had people reaching out to me asking me to style models for photo shoots for like for a hotel, or like a commercial that they were doing for the hotel, or style. I would just had people contacting me through the I worked for a government institution. I had people contacting me through there, like best-selling authors, politicians, saying like, "Would you style me?" or "What do you think I should wear for this?" or different things like that. So I always had a 9 to 5. I pretty much held a 9 to 5 down until 2019, when I just like couldn't deal with the schedule anymore. But it really didn't become about money, I would say, probably until between like 2015, 2019, when I started thinking about like quitting my 9 to 5. It was always about creativity and learning about people.
You bring up an interesting point though about like how you could put anything out there and it would kind of just click and it would resonate. I know there was a time in like Amazon stores when third parties could just basically list any product, and everyone needs everything all the time and there was no supply for the demand, so it could just click. And that happens, I think, across a lot of social medias. There's always these white spaces. And you'd mentioned that you were an influencer kind of before that term even existed. You would send emails, cold emails, to CEOs and marketing directors, and it got you deals with Marriott and Sephora and American Express. And a lot of that probably was because you were so early into the personal branding and the influencer game, and they weren't maybe getting a lot of these like professional pitches on, hey, I have an audience, here's my numbers, here's what I can do for you. How important do you think the timing was and is for people when they're trying to break into new markets like that?
I think the timing used to be more important than it is now. And what I think back then, it was like the faster you jumped on the new trend, the more you could make it work for you. But now I think things are moving at such a rapid pace. Now it's more about consistency with your storytelling than it is about strategy. So I think the strategy should be storytelling. Like, okay, for example, the one of the ways that I would go viral on Instagram, like at the beginning days, I'm just like, okay, I gotta retell you this. I gotta be ready here. Was I didn't have a personal brand as far as like my personal style went, like the colors I always wore, the patterns I always wore. I would craft my whole aesthetic and my whole photo around what I already saw the brand publishing. So, one of the ways I got the American Express collaboration was I published content of me dressed in a way, like an athlete sort of look on a golf course, and used American Express colors in my outfit, and then I posted it and I tagged them, and there was just a whole thing. I had a whole strategy behind it. That was how I got a lot of collaborations through social media when social media started to be a little more prevalent. Was I crafted my personal brand around the story that each individual company was trying to tell. So if I wanted to target a company, I would craft myself to be their ideal partnership, instead of me being like, hey, this is who I am, we should work together. Because I had a pretty big audience at one point, which I've archived this account. I don't use this account anymore, but across all social channels, I had over 250,000 followers. So I could have sold to my audience, but I was more so interested in creating creative content for the brands to use. And again, this is before user generated content was a thing. I just felt it was more interesting. It felt more organic. And I looked at stuff that normal, regular, everyday people posted before I looked at ads. And even now, almost never will you run across an editorialized ad. Almost always now, there's some influencer, celebrity, athlete in an ad, because no one cares about buying something from somebody that they don't know. So it either has to look like a normal person that they recognize, or it has to be somebody who they know who it is. And and I think, going back to what you were saying before, it really was more about the story I could help the brand tell the target audience than it was about the story I was trying to tell. And I think of it in the way of like a resume. let's say that you are fresh out of college, you've never had a job and or a serious job and you're applying for jobs. Let's say like your only experience is maybe like babysitting or something. On your resume, you're not going to put down that you were a babysitter. You would say that you were a scheduler, you would say that you were a personal shopper. You would list out the things that you did as a babysitter, maybe like, a live-in nanny or something, I don't know. You would list them out in a way that made it connect with the company you're trying to apply with so that you create a crafted personal image that matches what they are already looking for. So, as far as personal branding goes, I think you have to be willing to not change who you are, but you have to be willing to understand that the best way to connect with somebody is to show them that you understand them and that you empathize with them. And that goes from all the way from the top of collaborating with brands all the way through the finished content of connecting with the target audience.
I really like that framework of like, it's not as much about the timing anymore because everything is changing so fast that even if you were to catch like a bit of a trend, that's probably gonna get washed out pretty soon anyway. But it's more about like the story that you tell, whether that's for yourself, for a brand that you work with, and consistency with that story. I think that's really awesome. And I want to go back a little bit to the travel because this goes along with kind of that lifestyle and that influencer and brand deals and things like that. Is like you know all these places around the world, you know all the hot spots, you know all the recommendations, you have that all in your back pocket. But living that lifestyle, you've also made a lot of money like while on the road running your businesses. And there's a lot of aspiring digital nomads that watch this podcast. And I'm curious what tips you have for them to be able to like maximize their business while they're on the road, while they're traveling.
Oof, that's a really good one. I had to learn the hard way that I have to stick to a personal schedule and a personal plan. And I would say time management is going to be your best friend because if you're traveling through different time zones and stuff, it can be really easy to feel like you're on vacation and forget that you need to work. Otherwise, you won't be able to stay there. So I say having a daily routine, and I don't mean like getting up at 4:30 in the morning and doing your affirmations while facing the sun. Like I'm not talking about that stuff. I mean like I have to do a certain amount of work today. I will log on and do these things. I will answer these emails. And just remembering that it's a privilege and not a right to be able to have that lifestyle. You are going to have to work for it. It's not just going to fall in your lap. And anyone who posts on social media saying that it's easy or this or that is absolutely lying. So before anybody thinks, oh, I only have to work 3 hours a day or 2 days a week, and this is like, I'm going to make millions of dollars. The people to get to that point, absolutely every single one of them was up till 3 o'clock in the morning for weeks on end, crying and tearing their hair out, like trying to figure out how to make this work. So, anyone who's ever said to you, just follow this 3-step simple framework and you'll make your first 6 figures in 6 days, absolutely not. That's completely false. So, I would say, stick to a consistent schedule and make sure that when you are actually buckling down to do your work, that it's meaningful work, you're using your time the best way that you can, and you're not gaslighting yourself into thinking just because you're traveling around and taking the Instagram photos and meeting new people, that's not working. That's networking, which is great. But then at some point you got to shut off the socialization and you have to follow through and actually work on the stuff that you've been talking to other people about or you've been thinking about. You can think yourself into poverty. You can talk yourself into never actually doing anything. And I think that's something that's especially bad now. And I'm not going to call out like any group of people specifically, but I will say like Miami, for example, is a good example of this, where lots of people like to come into town and they spend all of their time partying, going out, doing all this stuff. And they realize they can't stay there, they can't live there because they haven't actually done any work while they've been there. I know so many people who 3 years ago, like they moved there during the pandemic, and almost half of the people I knew have had to since move away because they didn't actually they talked about working more than they actually worked. So I would say stick to a schedule, be really consistent, and remember that while the digital nomad life is about being free, you have to earn that freedom every single day by making deposits. You have to make a deposit on your freedom. Like you can even think about it like America. We aren't where we got today by just talking about being the best.
It's so true. And I've noticed that now working from home, and I built a bit of a routine and a schedule working online and creating content every day. And now I've been on the road for the past month or so. And I've had just distractions. I got a little bit sick. I had people in town. I'm in different apartment. I'm waking, it's a different time zone. And you really have to like focus on that time management. You really have to be intentional about like, okay, I have things to do and I need to get back on as close to a normal schedule as possible while still enjoying all the freedoms of being able to travel and see new places. And you definitely have to be super detail oriented as well, not lose track of those little things that got you to where you are. And so I know when you were doing like your blog in the beginning, you were on Google Blogger, which was like one of those first blogging platforms, and you had to pay really close attention to Google's algorithm and getting your blog seen and getting picked up, and that led to you being an expert in SEO, search engine optimization, kind of watching the algorithm update in real time and making adjustments. And you ended up building courses around that, and eventually a massive agency that helps companies and entrepreneurs get seen on Google search results. So, a lot of people that watch this, they're trying to build courses, they're trying to build agencies. What advice do you have for people that are kind of in the early stages of building out those digital product and service businesses?
I would say look for the gap in the market. So there's no new information. Even I look at this is something interesting. When I was just like learning more about marketing, I found out that the splashy titles that you'll see in newspapers were completely manufactured starting in the 1800s. So someone wanted to start a newspaper, but all the newspapers already existed that were reporting the actual news. So he was like, okay, I'm going to make these clickbaity titles. I'm going to create these fake titles. And it's going to be like, murder, da da da, exclamation point. This is again in the 1800s. This is printed on newspapers. So with these splashy titles, and he got kids to go out on the street corners and scream out the names of the titles of these crazy stories. And then he would get people to buy them, and he got people to subscribe to the newspaper. So then once he got the readership up, then he pitched the idea of selling ads in his newspaper. And so that was the beginning of manufacturing clickbait or manufacturing catchy hooks. So, and this started, it was like over 100 years ago now. There's nothing new, basically, is my point. Even in the 1700s, some of the Italian operas that we know and love today, they would not have become famous had the composers not hired people, they were called claqueurs, to come and clap and sit in the first row of the audience and clap and make a big deal about it and then go out and tell everyone. Those were the first influencers. Again, this was hundreds of years ago. So there's nothing new. It's only the way that you package it. And so there's no strategy anymore. Like we were saying before, it's all about storytelling. It's all about how can you connect with the person and show them that you empathize and understand their problem. You can sell the most random niche product if you can bring into people's awareness that they have the problem. So the awareness is first. A lot of times people aren't even aware they have an issue. And then number two, show them how you are the one and only option to solve that. The one and only option. And then put the product in front of them. So I think we get distracted thinking like, oh, the market's really saturated. It's always been saturated. It's always going to be saturated. You need to find the unique angle. And I don't mean talk about something people aren't talking about. I mean like don't try to sound smart. Don't try to sound like the smartest person. Don't talk or write above like an eighth grade reading level. Honestly, like a fourth grade, fifth grade reading level, if you can help it. Don't try to be smart. Show people how you're qualified to help them, but don't try to act like you're better than them. So I would say it needs to come down to humbling yourself first, which is like so hard as an entrepreneur because you already have to have such a level of delulu to believe that you can do it. So then to just like dial that back when you're trying to talk to your audience it can be difficult. And find a little bit of a niche, like go a little bit more narrow, go more narrow and more deep with what you're trying to solve. So like I know people who have really niche specific drop shipping stores and they're doing six figures a month on selling a random like clip that holds a baby's pacifier like onto the bib and it, to make sure that like the mom doesn't lose all these little moving parts. Like there's random specific needs that millions of people have that you may not even know about. And so I would say don't get caught up on this idea that you have to do something a certain way. Find out what people actually need and want, and be willing to kind of mold your marketing and your content and your product around what people are actually asking for and not what you think that people need.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, right? Because you mentioned like those little things or whatever that the moms had. It's like that's probably like an issue that they noticed in their own life. When I was working on my dating app, there was an issue that I had in my life. Like you find little things, and then you can say like, okay, is that valid? And can I verify that the market actually needs that as well? And now you're like, you are your own target market, and you can hopefully find something that's more organic and really tap into that. And then the business side kind of, that's just like looking up, like, how do I start a business? How do I do this? And the things fall into place. You learn those. Like, no one's born just knowing the tactical ways to start. It's more about, like, to your point, what are you actually serving? Who are you serving and how? And I know when the pandemic started, you had this course for SEO, and you ended up just, you knew people were in need, and you kind of removed the paywall off of that course, and you opened it up and you gave it away for free. And it was one of your higher ticket items. And you said that you unintentionally ended up making more money by allowing it to go out for free, because then people were hitting you up for like one-on-one implementation. Um, I'm curious how you think about, because this is something that a lot of people, again, are struggling with in the early going, is like, how do you balance free content with paid content and helping that come together to create some sort of demand?
Oh yeah. So I had a coach teach me this, and it's one specific thing. And when I heard this, the light bulb went on over my head. This is probably one of the single most useful pieces of information I have ever been taught. So what you're doing is you're giving away the your most valuable piece of information for free. Okay. So essentially you're saying like, this is, you need SEO. Like I'm giving the information away for free. I'm telling people like you need search engine optimization. These are all of the ways that it's going to blow up your business. This is all the ways that's going to make you money. Look, I made this much money, this person, da da da. What people are paying you for is the implementation process and the hand holding aspect. So it goes to creating content that creates awareness. Like, okay, for example, let's say I was selling a search engine optimization um, course, and I said, I would say something in my free content like, this would be top of funnel. I would say, I would absolutely never start a business if I didn't have search engine optimization in place. And this is where one of my clients started, and like take a screenshot of their sales on their website. And then this is where they went after SEO. So then what this does is it makes people aware like, oh, I better not even start a business until I have this. I wasn't even aware that they see the proof, and then they start thinking, okay, SEO, like, what is that? They're probably going to Google it. They're going to start looking for it. And then they're like, there's a lot here. They're going to come back and be like, well, how do I do it now? And then that's where they pay you for the implementation process. So you need to drive home the awareness that there's an issue to begin with. I stopped posting educational content whatsoever. No more like, here's 3 ways to optimize your website. Who cares? I don't I don't know why I need to optimize my website. I don't even know what SEO is. So instead of me doing all this educational content, 3 tips, this, da, 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 terrible engagement, it was not doing well. I pivoted to, I would absolutely not do this if this, or here's one thing I would never let a client do if they were trying to sell $1 million worth of e-commerce goods in 2024. And then you just say, this is where you are, this is where you want to be, that's it. And then you have like a simple call to action, like comment or drop. I notice, I don't know why the algorithm doesn't like the word comment, but now I say drop or DM. Drop, and also that, like, the, what's it called when you have like hear like a repeating sound, it sticks in people's heads more. You say like drop or DM.
Alliteration.
Yeah. Or I'll say like drop or DM me the word da da da, XYZ, and I'll help you get started tonight, or help you get started right now. I'll help you get started before 2024. And then you just set up a many chat automation and meta business, and you're good to go. Like, that stuff's easy, but I, it's really trying to make sure that you are not educating people because you're skipping a step. They don't know why you're qualified to educate them. They haven't seen the results. and they don't even know why they need that. And it just sounds like oh, now I got to pay for SEO. What the heck is that? I could probably do without it. No, you can't. And this is why.
Again, it kind of comes back to the storytelling, right? And the narrative. And it's like you can give away all the information, but if you frame it in a way that like builds intrigue and builds emotion, then all of a sudden people are looking to you for the answers, which is the more direct implementation. And that really is key. And it's something that I keep hearing and I think people really need to understand. And so I want to talk similarly with what you've done with your Instagram now, because this is your main social media platform at the moment. And you've had a ton of success as of late, getting millions of views with reels. And, you know, this has been very impressive, so much so that Meta has like reached out to you to actually help you and help you grow. But I went all the way back in your Instagram to one of your earlier posts in February 2020, one of your first posts. And it says, if you want people to communicate with your heart, you have to teach them the language it speaks in. And I thought that was really well put. And I know you well, and you're a master communicator. And I was hoping you could share some of your most effective communication strategies for people that are trying to build their online presence and their network.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Thank you. um, Listen more than you speak, like ask more questions than you do offer information. So when I've been trying to any business I've ever had online, I first had this idea of like, oh, I want to do this or I want to create this. And almost every single time I did that, I was met with crickets. And I thought, like, why don't people understand like how great this is? But I was looking at it from the view of someone who had already come through that and already seen the benefit of whatever it was I was trying to sell. So I had to, and this is going to sound so weird, but I did a lot of, I think like a lot of people did, started doing inner work, maybe some like self therapizing and all this stuff to the point where I was so far past remembering what I was like 10 years ago or 5 years ago or being in that place of the person I was trying to help, that I started getting out of touch with my audience. So I think that you can inner work your way out of being able to connect with people. And I think there's something to be said with not letting go of those raw parts of you that caused you to be so passionate about wanting to do the inner work and change in the first place. And it feels scary to go back to a place maybe that you were in before, but I didn't come up with this. This is something everyone's probably heard someone say, some Instagram person, coach say at this point, but it's your target audience is someone that you used to be like 1 to 5 years ago. So when you're trying to decide, what am I going to do when I'm going to help? Something that's most beneficial is to think about where you were. And I know it can be really terrifying to go back into your past and like relive something, but in the amount of true inspiration and intuition that's going to give you on your messaging is worth so much more than any case study or like poll that you could run, because you were that person at one point. So what I would encourage people to do is be radically honest with yourself. Go back to that place you were at 1 year ago, 5 years ago, and be like, how was I really feeling? What were the thoughts that were actually going through my head? And journal from a place of yourself 1 to 5 years ago. Get really raw and honest with it. Even if you maybe used to go to therapy or you had journals, go back, ask your therapist if you can see notes from those earlier sessions. Go back and ask your friends who you were friends with at that time, like, hey, what was I saying to you? What was I talking about? What was I frustrated with? And don't be afraid to go and peel back the layers of who you used to be, because that's where your ideal audience is now. And a lot of times people find it very difficult to open up to somebody who they don't feel like empathizes with them. So if you're so far past that previous version of yourself that you can't even empathize with yourself, people will sniff that and they won't open up to you. So I would say first get back in touch with the version of yourself you were 1 to 5 years ago. Like, this is so cheesy, but don't forget who you were. Don't forget where you came from. Don't ever act like you're too good to go back there. And if you really want to help people who are there now, you're going to have to find a way to bridge that gap between the person you are now and the person you were. So listen to yourself, and then you will be able to vulnerably connect with other people, because I would ask people all the time these questions, and I was so concerned about sounding intelligent and like I was so much further along than everyone else that I really didn't get good feedback. And this was a few years ago. Then I realized people don't want to talk to somebody who looks like they have it all together because it's just irritating. Like that's, I don't want to, I don't, I think everyone's been there. Like sometimes maybe you don't want to go somewhere, maybe you're not doing well in your life, and just like a short period of life, we've all been in those different places where it's like, well, I don't want to be around this group of friends that knew me in high school. I don't want to go to my high school reunion because this year I'm not doing great, or this year I'm not at my ideal weight or whatever. But if you can't just admit where you are, other people won't connect with you. And so I think about some of the most famous people that you'll notice people just overflow open up to them. Like Mel, is her name Mel Robbins? She's like a great interviewer. She just looks so normal and down to earth. She just talks like a normal person. She's so intelligent. She's so successful, but she has never lost that organic, real quality. She doesn't pretend, even though she's come so much further than most people ever will, she doesn't pretend like she's further along. She's just herself. And so I think if you want to connect with people, you're going to have to be really radically honest with yourself and listen to what people have to say and just allow them to kind of outpour their feelings. So I'll post things on my stories and ask my audience questions, or like for example, let's say your ideal audience, maybe you're trying to coach people or something. Maybe your ideal audience is Mel Robbins' audience. Go to the comment section because she's so vulnerable and open. People feel safe going into her space. Go to the comment section and see what people are saying. Like listen to what people are really saying and then work on humbling yourself and your vulnerability levels.
It's interesting you mentioned the like looking back 1 to 5 years on yourself. And you're right, I have heard that before, but just the way that you said it, I'm thinking to myself, like, it's one of those things where like you know that it's the right thing to do, but and you've probably even given the advice to someone, which I have. And I'm like, but have I actually like sat down and done that exercise and like really deeply gone into that guy who was struggling in XYZ, back then had I have probably problems now, but I had a different set of problems then that I've solved some of those. And can I truly speak to like take 20 minutes and literally do that? I don't think I've actually done that. And I think that could help a lot, particularly with like the way that I've navigated from the struggles I had then. I think actually really would help a lot of people now. So you just inspired me to do that. But it really comes down to kind of that communication, right? And understanding how to communicate with whether it's your past self or these other people and where they overlap. Um, you have like a lot of this boss babe energy, right? And part of that, being able to pull that off is being able to communicate with the guys and like kind of play in a very male dominated business ecosystem, for lack of a better term. And you've worked with thousands of women to help them get what they want out of life and out of their careers. So I have a two-part question here. Like, what are some of the things that women should be focused on when dealing with men and communicating with men in a business environment? And then what are some of the things that men can do to better support the women that are coming up around them?
I really appreciate this question. This is really good. So, one is this might be really wildly controversial to people, but I just don't care at this point. Like people are going to do what they're going to do. Men and women are not the same. We don't think the same, we don't look the same, we don't process emotions the same. So I would say the number one thing that men and women can do right now is recognize that we're equal parts of a yin and yang. We're like it's polarity. Like the more different it is, the better it's going to fit together. So for example, the way that men process information is like they want to be appreciated and understood. Women want to be appreciated and cherished. So we appreciate things in different ways. We want to be recognized in different ways. We want to be taken care of in different ways. So I would say for women, talk to men the way that they want to be talked to, not the way that you want to be talked to. So I think men do care about being taken care of to some degree, but they care more about being appreciated. So if I was going to ask a man for advice, I would say to him, hey, I really appreciate the work that you've done in this field. You've obviously worked so hard to become, a master at this. And I want to learn from somebody who really knows what they're talking about so I can avoid making mistakes. What type of advice would you have for me? And then be quiet and let him talk. Like, don't interrupt him, because the way that men process information, and Greg, you can like confirm or deny this, but active listening, like if you watch two men talk to each other, one is quiet until the other one stops talking. And then he'll even have like a pause before he says anything. So maybe you'll hear like a hmm, hmm, maybe. That's like the most noise you'll hear. But for women, I would say watch two men speak to each other if you want to know how to talk to a man. And for guys, I would say watch two women speak to each other and watch their facial expressions, watch how they interact with each other. And then I would say in person, for women, we appreciate if you stand right in front of us. We like being really close. Like our heart, our womb, all of everything important is right here. So we face each other like this. For men, that's like a dominant thing. So for a man, if I was going to talk to a man, I will angle myself at the woman. So like let's say there's a man and a woman sitting there, or you're in a group of people, angle yourself towards the woman if you're a female, and angle yourself to the side of a man if he's like standing this way. And then for guy, just an FYI, angle yourself slightly towards the woman, like more face on. And for men, slightly to the side. Because what it does is it opens up people's vulnerability and it drops their need to put up a protection like immediately. So I think it's also about body language, but the fastest way to learn how to talk to somebody is watch how those two genders interact with each other. Because again, women and men want two different things out of conversations, and they want two different things out of interaction. And so a man can walk away from a conversation thinking that it went great, and the girl will go and like text her girlfriends and be like, worst conversation I ever had. And he'll have no clue. So I would say women, then when a man shares information with you, don't be like, oh, thanks for mansplaining that. Like, please, can we stop saying that? Men love to explain things. They love to help. That's like your love language. So, one, don't get mad at a man when he wants to help, because one, you're getting like free help. You're getting free information. Like, I don't want to do anything. Like, please help me. And two, after he's taken the time to help you and talk to you, say, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. That's really helpful. And then guess what? Whenever you do that, he's going to offer you more help. Like I know women who have had, including myself, hundreds of thousands of dollars of free mentorship from men who typically would charge us, because I'm nice and I'm not rude in a conversation and I'm not acting like girl power, da da da, girls rule, boys rule. Like that's so childish. That's so over. We're so done with that. So for women who want to succeed in the business world, I would say you want equality? Well, then let men share with you what they know. That's the fastest way to get that equality. Although I'm less interested in quality, I'm more interested in equity. I would like a share of what has already been built, because I'm not going to come in and reinvent this wheel. So for all the women out there who are like, we're just coming into this, it's male dominated. Well, yeah, and you can use that to your advantage in a good way. I don't know a single man who isn't willing to help somebody. Usually they just don't get asked, and then they don't get thanked. So, I mean, it's as simple as that to start with. And for guys, women, I will have to say, and I don't claim these women, but women who are working on like moving out of like their boss babe era, and I think that term has like a bad connotation. Women who are trying to move into their soft boss babe era, maybe out of their hustle mode boss babe era, we're struggling. And I was at this place maybe like 5 years ago. We're struggling to understand when to lean back and accept help and when to like drive forward and hustle. So just be patient with us and maybe sandwich your advice between some compliments or something. Say like, I see that you're doing this, and I'm so impressed with the work that you've done. I'm using a phrase that a man has approached me with when he was offering me basically unsolicited advice, but I needed it. I think he said something like, you're so impressive. I'm really impressed with all that you've done. You're a great role model for other women. Women love that compliment. If we get a compliment about having built community, or like for women, the ultimate compliment is like, you're a girl's girl. So if someone says like, oh, I see how other women look up to you, oh, you've immediately got her attention if you say that to her. Um, and I was wondering if I could offer you something that I think would help you do XYZ. And then if she says yes, which she's going to say yes to that, that's like, melt me now. Then you've got the conversation started. So again, you talk to them the way that they want to be spoken to, not the way that you want to be spoken to. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, that was way more than I could have expected. Like that was a master class in communication between the sexes in like 5 minutes. Um, and I think we could do an entire podcast, and we probably should do an entire podcast on just that. We've actually talked about that before.
Oh yeah, you and
Um,
I have talked about this for hours, but yeah,
yeah, it's amazing. And I love your perspective on it. This podcast is very much like educational towards content creators, but eventually it's going to switch to like the Greg Lunt podcast, where I just have like more like curiosity, deep driven, and it just goes where it goes versus like going down my kind of list of questions here. But so that's amazing. And if obviously you guys need to check out like everything Rachel's doing, because she's a absolute queen at understanding those dynamics that has helped her be so successful. And another part of that is building out your network. And you have a very powerful real world network. And I know you've like done things like intentionally put yourself into country clubs or different venues where wealthy people congregate, and you're very strategic about how you position yourself physically to be in the rooms with these types of individuals. And you even put out like an ebook a few months ago, the 7-second impression, where you help people make great first impressions. And what are some of, I mean, I guess it's kind of off the back of the last question, but maybe gender, non-gender specific, like what are some of your best recommendations for people as far as expanding their personal networks?
I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish with this. So, if you're trying to up level your network because you want better opportunities in life, like maybe you want to be I always say, like, I want to be the dumbest, poorest person in the room because I like learning from people who are smarter than me. I would say you need to figure out what your ultimate goal is. So some people want to be made connections because they're trying to get into a different market. Maybe some people want to be in a room full of people who are going to be potential clients. So I would say figure out what your goal is, and then kind of go from there and find out. Okay, kind of the same way as finding your ideal client on Instagram, so that you can really learn what's going on in their heads, and by going to maybe the comment section of someone who's in a similar industry as you, and reading what people are really thinking. Think about the same thing of, okay, the people that I want to hang around, the people where I want to be, what are they doing on a Friday night? What are they doing on a Saturday morning? I can tell you that I know, like, the wealthy, influential people I want to be connected to, who are going to help me grow my business and make a bigger impact. They're doing things like playing padel on Saturday morning. They're going for a long run because they're training for a marathon on a Saturday morning. They weren't out until 2 o'clock the night before partying. Um, Private dinners with like 25 people, small rooms, parties that are like pre or post, like mastermind groups, like um, are great places to network. But I would say ask yourself what your intention is, what you're trying to get out of it. And I always say, I'm not trying to close a client, I'm just trying to make one friend. So anywhere I go to network, I'm like, I'm going to leave here with one new friend, and that's it. So that way your energy and your tone and the conversation that you have is much more organic and natural and free flowing, where you're like, I'm just here to make friends, because people do business with people they like. I mean, that's why you always hear like the most deals are struck on the golf course, is because people are having fun. They're enjoying someone's company. That's why deals are struck like that. I mean, deals are finished in boardrooms, but they're started on golf courses. So the idea is, I'm not here to like close 10 clients. I'm not here to give my business card out to 10 people. I'm just here to make friends. And I cannot tell you the amount of business deals I've had closed after the fact from making friends and just getting people to like you, or just being a nice person. And, you don't have to be the wittiest person in the room. You don't need to be the life of the party. I never am. I'm just really good at listening. Like Greg, like, you ask great questions. I ask questions, and I let people talk about themselves. Sometimes people don't ever get a chance to talk about themselves. And so if you give somebody a chance to do that, they're going to think that you're a great conversationalist when really they were doing most of the talking the whole time.
I love the intentionality of going into a conversation as I want to make a friend rather than I want to get something out of this, because it's an entire like energy shift where it goes from like a needy energy to a giving energy. And that is everything, because when you like somebody, they're going to like you back. If you're trying to like be friendly and be like, hey, let's like be friends, like you're cool, they're going to be like, oh, you're kind of cool too. And then, if it organically goes into like, hey, I'm actually part of my personality is I'm interested in business, and I'm doing this, and oh, what are you doing? Oh, there's actually synergies there, and we fuck we like fuck with each other like on a personal level. Then that's like a really interesting dynamic to create, and the intentionality again is the important part. And it reminds me kind of what I do on X in these spaces where it's like I just like to go in there and talk to people and make friends and like yeah, I started interviewing people and stuff like that, but it was more of like, I'm really curious about you. I want to know about you and follow up with them offline and build relationships that are more organic. And then all of a sudden, business opportunities start to come up. And I just love social audio. Obviously, you and I actually met on Clubhouse 3 years ago. And for people that don't know, Twitter Spaces is basically just a clone of Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a standalone app, same idea, same audio room, speakers, audience, all that stuff. So that's where Rachel and I met. And you were very successful on that app, making deals, but also just generally networking and meeting people. And I know you still keep in touch with a lot of people from those days now. So for the people that are listening to this, they do spend a lot of time in spaces, many of them. And this is kind of the new Clubhouse, let's say. Can you speak to the power of audio rooms in your experience and how you navigated stages with people that you really wanted to connect with?
Oof, I like this because there's nothing more intimate than just being in somebody's ear. Like, think about you close your eyes and you just listen to someone and they're right in your head and it feels like they're right there. That's so much more powerful than anything else. It's more powerful than a text. That's more powerful than video. You can't get any closer than someone in your ear. So, part of what I would do is I would be paying attention to my tone of voice. So, I would choose what tone of voice or speed my voice was going to be at based on the room, based on the reaction that I wanted, based on what I was trying to accomplish, and also the time of day. So early morning, it was like, wow, she's so positive. She has a great attitude. She's like, oh, I love hearing your voice in the morning. People would say that to me. And then in the evening, I would talk slower. I would be like, I would have like try to have more like a silky quality to my voice. And people remember how you made them feel. People don't remember anything that I said. People remember how you make them feel. And so with audio, think about how you can lean into the feeling of that. Like, how do you feel when you leave an interaction and you feel really good? Think about how that person sounded. Because a lot of times, again, we won't remember something somebody said. We'll remember the way that they made them feel. I say the same thing with fashion and style is like, you'll look at a beautiful woman and you won't know what brand the dress was. You'll just remember the woman. And it's the same with your voice. Choose your words with intentionality, but choose your tone so much more carefully. So I would say my tone was a big part of it. The words I chose were a big part of it, but don't overthink it. Like, don't try to pretend to be somebody you're not. Think about how you would like to feel, how you want to leave people feeling. And like I was saying before with the intentionality of making a friend thing, just try to leave people better than when you walked into the room. Oh, I hope people leave with like a sense of being refreshed or being inspired, and think about the way that you want to make people feel rather than hoping that they think that you sound brilliant or even intelligent, to be honest.
Yeah, I talk about, when people talk about even like fear getting up on stage, I think this advice goes to that, but also to what you're saying is focus more on the message and less on like yourself and getting in your head or even like the person on the other end. Because I think if you focus on the message and it's a pure message, then that energy resonates. And that is the power of audio, right? That you mentioned is kind of like the tone really sets a certain level that is more accurate and is deeper, and it provides an incredible opportunity. But you also need to have like the courage to get up on stage in the first place. I think is a big thing, and we need to put ourselves out there and trust ourselves to deliver. And I heard you say that one of the biggest shifts you ever experienced was realizing that I was the only thing holding myself back from achieving what I actually wanted. And then as soon as you accepted that, a lot of doors started to open for you like almost immediately. And so I have another two-part question here. One is, what are the most exciting doors that have opened for you this year? And two, how can people get to that same point where they feel like they're giving themselves permission to succeed?
Oof, oof. Most exciting doors that opened for me this year. I think this is a really random one, but I realized that my words and my thoughts have so much power. And I have this friend who she's like wildly famous. She's like Google famous. She's literally in the press every single day. And I told her, I was like, hey, I was talking to her the other week in Miami, and I was like, hey, this is going to sound really silly to you because you have over 18,000 of these, but I really want a Getty image. You know, like when you get a photo taken by a Getty image photographer and like you're on the website. I was like, I really want to get Getty image. I was like, it means nothing. It's just like an ego thing for me. She has 18,000, over 18,000 Getty images. Like if you Google her name, she was like, oh, she's like, that's easy. We can do that. The very same night, she messaged me and she was like, if you can get your butt over to XYZ location, Getty Images is here. And I was like, so what I realized was there's so many people who, again, for a while, I had this friend, and I knew at the beginning of our friendship, there was no way I was going to impress her because she's such an impressive person. She's so far ahead of me. She's like 12 years older than me, all this stuff. So I realized if I am too scared to ask for what I want, I'm never going to get it. And again, this is a cliched saying that like we've all heard, but I just wanted to give an example of it. It's like the way that you phrase your questions, the way that you phrase your asks, bear in mind how it's going to sound to the person hearing it. Because her, as a famous person, I imagine she gets hit up all the time for favors, and I don't want to be that friend. I've known her for 3 years, and I've never asked her for a favor. She's offered all kinds of things to me. Like, she's directly responsible for so many successful things that have happened to me in the last 3 years, and experiences and like opportunities that I've gotten, like not directly from her, but like indirectly from like just help that she's given me. And I thought, I can just ask. And if she says no, or if she's like, oh, I don't really know what advice to give you, it's not a big thing. So I think when I'm trying to think of like doors that I want open to me, I think of like, what is the best entry level thing I can ask for? Like, I'm not going to ask for her to connect me with like the most famous person that she knows. I'm going to ask for something that is an easy thing for her to give me. Like, oh, I get a Getty image every day. So yeah, that's easy for me to give you. So I would say when I'm thinking about the biggest doors that have been open to me this year, it was because I asked for something reasonable that I knew could lead to something bigger. So I'm not saying like don't shoot for the moon. I definitely do that. But what's that saying? Shoot for the moon, aim for the stars, or something like
Land amongst the
Right.
stars.
That's exactly what it is. That's that. So the biggest doors that have opened to me was when I saw my big vision and I like nailed it to the front of my brain. But I knew if I landed somewhere close, at least I was closer. Like at least I was closer to it than I was now. Um, I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I think you kind of answered both, because one was like, what's open for you? And then how can other people like set
Oh,
themselves up
okay.
for success? Right. And I think that's a huge part of it is kind of like, don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
Yeah,
I think that's an amazing message.
it's kind of hard to balance between like your big goals and what you believe is possible, because the thing is the big goals that you have you've never had, so your brain automatically assumes that they're not possible, but your brain doesn't know the difference between reality and something that's fake. And so when I said out loud what I wanted, I immediately got it because it literally exists. It already exists. Whereas for years, I built up this image in my mind where I was like, how am I ever going to get something like this? Like this is crazy. But I think open yourself to the fact that if it exists, this is something one of my mentors said to me, and this is like, I was just a mind blown when I heard this. She said, if it exists, it's available to me. And I was like, oh my God, that's true. And I always have heard the saying that you're like 7 degrees of separation away from, no, you're literally 1 degree of separation away. You are literally yourself. You are the person that's this degree of separation away from what you want. And you just need to take responsibility for it and admit it. I think it's taking personal responsibility at the end of the day, because for years, one of the reasons I wasn't as successful as I could be is because I like to pretend like it was all these other people and circumstances' fault that I wasn't where I wanted to be. But I mean, the truth of the matter was it wasn't, it was me. So take personal responsibility. I have no new advice for y'all. I'm just like I had said before, I'm packaging it in a new way.
That's what this is. I actually talk a lot about that recently on X and creating content. Is like this idea of platitudes, and when people just post like these 280 character tweets that they try to just be more clever than the person before them, but really, those don't really hit. It's when you add like longer form and you add like personal stories, and then you deliver the lesson. There's no new lessons. Like, we're all just repeating the same stuff that we all know. There's certain rules to life. There's certain tips and tricks, and we've all heard them in one way or another, but can you contextualize them so that people can actually internalize them? And I think you've done an amazing job of that today. This is so much good stuff. I need to listen back to this a number of times. And I want to thank you for coming on, Rachel. I mean, I've told you this so many times, but I just have to say it like in a public space, is you are the perfect blend between like one of the most feminine people I've ever met, but also one of the most assertive and kind of successful business people I've ever met. And that's like pretty much doesn't exist outside of you, as far as I could tell, because there's this like real alpha energy that it takes to be successful and play amongst the men, as we talked about before, and to be able to then like tap into your submissive feminine energy at the same time in such a free flowing way is amazing. And I'm just so grateful to have you as a friend and all the advice you've given me, and just yeah, it's just amazing to have you a part of my life. So
Thank you.
thank you for coming on the show. I want to give you, you've already given so much information and so much wisdom, but I want to give you one more chance. If there's anything that's like really on your mind as a word of encouragement for people, particularly content creators, maybe like going forward into like this new world, and also where people can find you online and download your stuff.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I know this is for probably a large Twitter audience, but I wanted to briefly say what you had mentioned about like I got contacted by Meta, and then they basically told me the secrets to the algorithm. I was like, I was blown away by what they shared with me on this one-on-one call I had with them, and then they're going to continue helping me for the next 6 weeks, actually. And so I have emails, and I'm able to text this person at Meta and ask questions, which is really crazy, like something I never thought I would have access to. But I wanted to say for anybody like watching this video or anything, I was thinking about sharing what I learned about like from Meta about the algorithm. And also, I know it's Instagram, not Twitter, but a lot of it's carryover information that's common sense stuff that's just good marketing. So if anybody is interested in learning about that, DM me the word Greg on Instagram, and I'll know that you came from this podcast, and I'll send you guys some of the information that I learned from that Meta call, because I feel like it's so good. But I don't really talk about marketing or growth on my personal Instagram, so I'm just going to share personally with people like through conversations like this. But I just wanted to share that. And then also, you can find me everywhere online at the Kennedy Curate. That's
We'll have all the links in the description.
yeah.
Um, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure as always, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, thank you.